Today on Uncommon Sense, is an inconvenience really only an adventure wrongly considered? Let's find out. Well, hello, viewers and listeners. Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. My name is Joe Grabowski, the VP for Evangelization here at the Society. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Grettelyn Darkey. Hi, Grettelyn.
Hey there, how's it going?
Pretty well, thank you. And today on this episode, we want to talk about what is arguably one of the most famous Chesterton quotes, certainly one that gets quoted quite a lot as kind of an aphorism and has a lot of great poignancy and meaning to it. We'll talk about it in its original context. We'll talk about kind of the instant case Chesterton considers as an illustration of this, and we'll just talk about its general applicability in our lives. But let's start off with the quotation itself. An adventure is only an inconvenience rightly considered. An inconvenience is only an adventure wrongly considered. So there it is, just two sentences. Chesterton's typical verbal wordplay, kind of taking two things and paradoxically looking at them the opposite way than is usual. But let's start with just trying to parse that quotation itself without looking at context and try to determine what it means. Any thoughts on that, Grettelyn?
Yeah, so for quite a few of you, this will be a familiar quote because of our conferences. We have had the Cup of Inconvenience or the Cup of Adventure, depending on who you talk to, which is partly to encourage our attendees to look at their inconveniences in a proper light. But yeah, on the face of it, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, the quote. If you position your attitude properly, life can look one way or it can look another way. So that would be my immediate parsing of the quote without any other context involved.
Yeah, and I think it's just good, sound wisdom from Chesterton, and an insight that comes up, I would argue, again and again in his writings. This notion that an adventure is simply the right way of look at what could be called, if you looked at it the wrong way, an inconvenience, right? So we think of kind of paradigmatic examples of adventure. I don't know, Moses being asked to lead this stiff-necked people out of Egypt and into the promised land, or Abraham being asked to leave his father and go forth and become the father of nations, or maybe a little closer to home, more familiar to us, alas, perhaps, if we're not spending our adequate time with Scripture. Bilbo Baggins, Bilbo Baggins having his convenient and very leisured life interrupted by an upstart wizard who carves a mysterious sign on his door, which begins all kinds of adventure, not only for Bilbo, but for his heir, Frodo. And so I think that is kind of the stereotypical example, right? If you recall The Hobbit, the beginning of that whole journey there and back again is really just all about Bilbo being inconvenienced. Tolkien, I think, probably had, if not this quotation, at least this sentiment in the back of his mind, because the whole start of the book is Bilbo complaining about having run out of his house without even a proper cloak. So I think that there's just good wisdom in this, and it's about more than just taking a sunny attitude and putting on a happy face when things are going wrong, but to really see it for the adventure that it is. See what how lucky we are to have the unexpected happen to us from time to time.
Yeah, and it's about engaging with life, I think, and not simply being victimized by it. It's funny that you mentioned The Hobbit. I was thinking of it as you were mentioning it. I'm rereading it with my kids, And there is actually a line in it that I'd totally forgotten about that I can't get it off the top of my head, but essentially Tolkien says it's one of those funny things that normal everyday experiences aren't actually that interesting, and very uncomfortable things and dangerous things actually are. And then he sort of goes on with the story and recounts, I don't remember the part with the trolls or something, but yeah, it's true. It's true. But yeah, I think at its heart, it is about, and we'll get into this in the essay, it's about engaging with life with, as our French friends would say, with that joie de vivre, that joy of life that you get into. Even the little things can be an exciting battle. And again, as we will find out, this isn't necessarily a little thing that Chesterton is talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, and to bring it into our modern day even, and just to think about contexts in which this sort of advice pops up, that are maybe not Chestertonian, but I think it shows the enduring relevancy of what Chesterton is on about here. I think of, uh, the famous podcaster Joe Rogan, or people like Jordan Peterson, who advise people, especially young men, to do something hard, right?
Mm,
What is weightlifting other than inconvenient? I
mm,
mean, first of all, you have to get the equipment, you have to take time out of your day to do it, you have to hurt a little bit, you cause yourself a certain amount of pain. We even have these sort of bromides, these truisms that we throw around: no pain, no gain.
yeah.
And I think Chesterton is pointing us to a deeper insight there, that really, in a certain respect, the pain is the very gain. It's not that it's not simply a utilitarian approach. It's not simply kind of reversing our perspective, but it's this. Well, there's a deeper element to it, I think, of the mystery that Chesterton is getting at here. That adventure is kind of what we're built for in certain ways, and the very things that we think are convenient, comfortable, etc., might be the worst things for us. We need to
Mm,
venture out. Um, so
yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit. But you mentioned, Gretelyn, that we'll be considering the source. So why don't you tell our viewers and listeners, what that source is?
So Chesterton is describing a flood. Not an inconsiderable flood, not a huge flood, but not an inconsiderable flood that happened in London in 1906. Um, and in the context of this essay, which is called "On Running After One's Hat," he starts it out by saying, "This is what I'm talking about." He says, I feel an almost savage envy on hearing that London has been flooded in my absence while I'm in the mere country." um, Amazing. And then he goes on to describe what he thinks his own section of London would look like, sort of this Venetian picture that's very romantic and amazing. But what a line, right? What a thing to say. I wish I had been there when it flooded. It's very much something that my 8-year-old, I think, would say if he heard about somewhere being flooded and he wasn't allowed to be around or able to be around. Um, yeah.
Yes, indeed. So this appears in the collection under that title, as on Running After One's Hat. It appears in the collection All Things Considered. It's originally
Mhm.
from, as many will be familiar with, All Things Considered is one of those um, one of those compilations of Chesterton's works that
Mhm.
kind of collects some of his uncollected journalism, or some of his more charming journalism. And it's originally a piece, I believe, from the Illustrated. Yeah, it's definitely from the Illustrated London News.
I think so.
I can't recall off the top of my head the title of it there, but I think it. Typically, he wrote a column for the Illustrated London News, which was simply called Our Notebook. And so a lot of the titles that you'll find ascribed to ILN essays for Chesterton are actually just post hoc kind of titles given to it. They're not really titles that he would have given it himself. I think we have it collected under the title of something like "On Enjoying the Flood," um,
Hmm.
which is great too. But yes, indeed, this was a real flood. It happens. It happened in late June of 1906, and so the original context in which Chesterton is talking about this is the next Saturday edition of the Illustrated London News, which would be July 7th of 1906. And I have a little excerpt from an article here in the Daily Mirror on June 30th, kind of reporting it on the spot. Great floods in London. Railway and tramcar traffic stopped. Many streets underwater. Exciting scenes, all in bold print. People imprisoned in upper rooms rescued by firemen. 2.25 inches of rain. Then the article goes on. That was all just the headline. I love the early 20th century conventions of newspapers. We'll try to get a screenshot of maybe this article up on screen so that you can see the exciting news in the midst of this reporting of woe. Uh, but the article goes on to say there was a rainfall in London yesterday of 2.27 inches. The deluging character of the downpour can be judged from the fact that an average rainfall for the whole month of June is only 2.19 inches. More than a month's rain descended in the course of some 10 hours.
Mm.
Goes on to talk about how historic this is. It gives some nice figures to us. The fall represented 227 tons of rain to the acre. Thus, in Greater London, over 100 million tons fell. Enormous damage done by the flood in London. Crops in the country, particularly the hay crop, sustained much injury. It talks about Londoners paddling through the streets, how they had gotten out sort of boats and things, of the railways being held up. But a particular area of interest, and when I kind of started researching the newspaper archives around this time, apparently one area that was particularly hit and which apparently was particularly susceptible to floods was the area of Fleet Street known for the journalism trade.
Mm.
Thus, this, in a certain way, well, as we'll get into with the essay, it hits home with Chesterton kind of in two connections: his place where he was living at Battersea at this time, and also where he would have worked down in Fleet
Mm.
Street. It says the area between Fleet Street and Thames Embankment always suffers heavily from excessive rain, and yesterday was no exception. Almost all of the premises in the lower parts of, and that describes several little districts there, were involved to a greater or less degree. The basement of the offices of one newspaper was found full of water, and the fire brigade at Carmelite Street Station were called to pump the water out with their steam engines. The paper, meanwhile, had to be printed elsewhere.
Mm.
So it particularly impacted, and I wonder whether Chesterton, as occasionally happened, this is just sort of surmise, anecdote. We don't know where he was, that he was away from home and he missed the flood. But I wonder if this is one of those cases where Chesterton realizes he has a deadline coming up and just reaches for the nearest thing to mind, which is the fact that maybe his previous week's submission had gotten mixed up or delayed because of the flooding in the newspaper district. And so he has that on his mind, and so he just writes to it. But yeah, as you say, Gretelyn, he does go on to talk about other things in the essay. He talks about running after one's hat. And I think we want to get down to and focus a little bit more on that. But anything more to share at this juncture? I have a couple other newspaper geeky items that I want to share with people before we read the flood itself. But
No,
anything?
I want to hear that. That sounds great. But yeah, he does qualify that he's not, there's no like loss of life. He's not rejoicing over, something that's necessarily truly tragic, and even points out like there are things that can't be enjoyed necessarily, like he says being burnt at Smithfield or having a toothache. But pointing out that there are many things in our life that could be enjoyed or not, just depending on our disposition. So that's kind of interesting too. I think that alone is sort of it's sort of a lesson. When I was a little kid, I remember cleaning the house and pretending to be Cinderella, and it was like so fun. And I hate cleaning the house now. Like, I don't want to do that, but I could still be pretending to be Cinderella and probably having some kind of fun. So anyway, just that little point I think is just wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great snapshot of time to see Chesterton, kind of being more journalistic and responding
Yeah.
to current events and events of the time, and yet you understand what differentiated Chesterton. Nobody else is going to be writing about the flood at the time and start to pull these sort of philosophical insights from it or talk about the joy of being able to run after one's hat, which we'll get. Um, so I love the contemporaneizing of Chesterton, if that's a noun I can verb. Um,
We'll take it.
yeah, or a verb I can noun rather. It's just a lovely insight into kind of the time, the moment. I had great delight in tracking down this particular issue of the Illustrated London News. And it's also evidence of, I think, of why Chesterton would have so much enjoyed writing for this particular paper and stuck with them for so long because the paper was
Mm.
beautiful. So here I'll share
Mm.
an image, and we'll try to have this up on screen. But this is sort of a little cartoon that got or two sets of drawings, and it was sort of what was it called? Henley in two aspects or something like that. But this is the Henley boat race was coming up. The Henley Regatta, the famous Henley Regatta, was coming up during that week, and so they knew that the boaters were going to be facing all kinds of rapid currents, and that was much talked about in the press. But also, all these summer goers, all these people had started to arrive already for the regatta and start to set up camp and things and book the local hotels to watch it, this great event. And so just this lovely, very neatly done, comparison of the ideal of sunshine and the sudden shower and how that would
Mm.
affect things at Henley, I think is just such a great image. And all of the pages of the Illustrated London News were just done that way. They were very artistically laid out and a lot of neat artwork throughout.
I have an Illustrated London News given to me by a Chestertonian as a wedding present, and yeah, it was like the date of our wedding, and it's gorgeous. I love looking through it. It's wonderful.
They are
Yeah.
great. It's
Hmm.
I encourage you to, if you have any resources to look into newspaper archives, the Illustrated London News is worth looking into, and of course, you'll always find a Chesterton piece in there if you're looking basically between the years of, gosh, when did he start writing for them? Early 1900s,
Early. Yeah.
1904, maybe up until basically the time of his death in 1936. So
Mm.
lots of great stuff there. Um, I do want to quote this one other passage before we get back to the main article itself. And this is from the Fulham Chronicle, Fulham being another sort of district in London. And this is on June 29th of 1906. The headline reads Flooded. And then it describes the scene in the train station. People who hurried, one after another, into Walham Green station this morning to catch their trains were surprised to find that there were no trains running, owing to the lines being flooded between that station and West Brompton. Passengers, having had matters explained to them, lost no time in getting on motor and horse buses, which, as a consequence, had unusually heavy loads up to 10 o'clock. It was rather uncomfortable on top of a bus in the rain, but everybody good humoredly submitted to it for once.
Mm.
Um, and that last line, I think, kind of gets us back to Chesterton and back to
Mhm.
sentiment that he would ideally have people adopt. That, you know, the adventure of being on top of an omnibus, being so recent a thing at all, uh, how could we already become so jaded to view it as an inconvenience in any
Mm.
circumstance, rain or shine, right? I think would be kind of Chesterton's approach. Uh,
Mm. Mm. No, I'm thinking back to both Joe and I are Pennsylvanians, and you had an episode on it. We had that weird bout of snow here in the middle of March, and over the course of an evening, we were all covered in snow in the middle of March, and it wasn't like a dusting. It was like you can go back to that episode and see that the picture that Joe has on the screen. It was a real snow, and that was a sort of little interesting moment that I thought of this quote because it was the weekend. We had nowhere to go. We had gone to mass already the night before. We were just like, okay, we're just gonna have a nice little snowy. It was beautiful. There was something kind of special about it. We could have just grumbled about it the whole time, and we did a little bit, but mostly it was just sort of a nice little cozy adventure. So yeah.
Yes, indeed. So I think we can jump from the weather into sort of the more daily occurrences that would occur to
Mhm.
Chesterton as potential adventures, and perhaps Gretelyn, if you want to read from running after one's hat, where
Yeah.
he gets to describing that instance of adventure that we might have that for some reason people seem to consider inconvenient.
Sure, no problem. It's great. So he says, for instance, there is a current impression that it is unpleasant to have to run after one's hat. Why should it be unpleasant to the well-ordered and pious mind? Not merely because it is running, and running exhausts one. The same people run much faster in games and sports. The same people run much more eagerly after an uninteresting little leather ball than they will after a nice silk hat. There is an idea that it is humiliating to run after one's hat. And when people say it is humiliating, they mean that it is comic. It certainly is comic, but man is a very comic creature, and most of the things he does are comic. Eating, for instance. And the most comic things of all are exactly the things that are most worth doing, such as making love. A man running after a hat is not half so ridiculous as a man running after a wife. I'll keep going a little bit if I can. Um, Now a man could, if he felt rightly in the matter, run after his hat with the manliest ardor and the most sacred joy. He might regard himself as a jolly huntsman pursuing a wild animal, for certainly no animal could be wilder. In fact, I am inclined to believe that hat hunting on windy days will be the sport of the upper classes in the future. There will be a meet of ladies and gentlemen on some high ground on a gusty morning. They will be told that the professional attendants have started a hat in such and such a thicket, or whatever be the technical term. Sorry, it's too funny. Notice that this employment will, in the fullest degree, combine sport with humanitarianism. The hunters would feel that they were not inflicting pain. Nay, they would feel that they were inflicting pleasure, rich, almost riotous pleasure, upon the people who were looking on. When last I saw an old gentleman running after his hat in Hyde Park, I told him that a heart so benevolent as his ought to be filled with peace and thanks at the thought of how much unaffected pleasure his every gesture and bodily attitude were at that moment giving to the crowd. Oh, I love that picture of the hunt after the hat. So great.
It is indeed, and it was something that I think clearly stuck with Chesterton. Now, again, he's writing this in 1906, and I believe it is 1907 or eight, maybe a little after I get my dates. I need to start getting these things locked down in my brain a little more. But his novel Man Alive comes out.
Mm.
For those that are familiar with Man Alive, you might be thinking in that description of a certain introduction of a certain character who's very important to that novel.
Mm.
Um, I'll read briefly from that passage. So they're basically all the guests at Beacon House are standing out in the garden, and suddenly all sorts of accidental objects could be seen scouring the wind-scoured sky: straws, sticks, rags, paper, and in the distance a disappearing hat. Its disappearance, however, was not final. After an interval of minutes, they saw it again, much larger and closer, a white Panama, towering up to the heavens like a balloon, staggering to and fro for an instant like a stricken kite, and then settling in the center of their own lawn as falteringly as a leaf. Somebody's lost a good hat, said Dr. Warner shortly. Almost as he spoke, another object came over the garden wall, flying after the fluttering Panama. It was a big green umbrella. After that came hurtling a huge yellow Gladstone bag, and after that came a figure like a flying wheel of legs, as in the shield of the Isle of Man. But though for a flash it seemed to have 5 or 6 legs, it alighted on two, like the man in the queer telegram. It took a form of a huge, light-haired man, in gay green holiday clothes. He had bright blonde hair that the wind brushed back like a German's. His head, however, was by no means cherubic. He goes on, blah, blah, blah. But Inglewood had the politeness, instinctive and yet awkward. So he tries to go after and grab the hat, and the big man yells, "Unsportsmanlike! Give it fair play! Give it fair play!" He came after his own hat quickly but cautiously with burning eyes. The hat had seemed at first to droop and dawdle in an ostentatious languor on the sunny lawn, but the wind again freshening and rising, it went dancing down the garden with the devilry of a pas de quatre. The eccentric went bounding after it with kangaroo leaps and bursts of breathless speech, of which it was not always easy to pick up the thread. Fair play, fair play. Sport of kings, chase their crowns, quite humane. Tramontana, cardinals chasing red hats, old English hunting. And he's just spouting this nonsense. This is the introduction of Innocent Smith,
Mm.
arguably the most quintessential and Chestertonian character in all of Chesterton and in all of his fiction. And it just reveals to you, we've been uh, doing this time and again here on the podcast recently and in recent episodes, how when you pull a thread in Chesterton, it leads you almost everywhere else in Chesterton, and
Yeah.
yet it's always a thread. It goes through all of these wonderful twists and turns, and so you might think running after one's hat is the throwaway part of this essay. The real pith of it is in that quote, "An inconvenience is merely an adventure wrongly considered." But here we have the sport of the hat hunt embodied in fiction, which just shows you how much pleasure Chesterton took in his own idea here.
And I'm sure he ran after his hat many, many a time. I'm an avid hat wearer. I often run after my hat. But I do think that idea of the thread of Chesterton is so. That's a great insight, Joe, because there is so much of Chesterton that is Chesterton just rethinking and retooling his ideas, and it shows such a greatness of mind. I mean, the man. We tend to think sometimes, I think, that big changes or lots of ideas show a greatness of mind. But I would argue that someone like Chesterton, who, if you really pull all those threads, like there's not a ton of ideas. You could probably, for all that he's written, kind of count his ideas up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe Gear can do that, but Gear Hasness. But my point is that he was continually refining the right ideas. And you get that over and over in different ways, like with Manalive, with this essay. We probably do it every time we talk on the podcast. We're like, well, there's also this thing that he wrote about this and this exact same instance.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you read it, it's a little bit different and it's a little bit more refined or less refined. And in a certain way, that might seem like laziness or just recycling or something, but it's not. I think it's definitely a process, and it allows the reader to come at these ideas from different angles and understand them better and revisit them in different ways.
Well, it's also just how to have a philosophy, right? You
Mm-hmm.
you have certain first principles, you have certain essentials. I've argued for years that that list of 5 insights that Chesterton gives at the end of the Ethics of Elfland is sort of like this fractal pattern that is his entire worldview. Basically,
Mm,
that basically single paragraph of the 5 insights that he has is kind of the summation of the Ethics of Elfland. The Ethics of Elfland is sort of the model of the Book of Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is sort of the model of the philosophy of G.K. Chesterton, and it really is that kind of simple on the one hand, beguilingly simple, and yet the actual living out of this, the actual application of this kind of perspective, is a life's work, and it's what he
yeah.
spent his entire life working out of how to really bring it to bear. And this is why he's so refreshing, because he brings the same sort of vision, the same sort of perspective, the same sort of paradoxical view, standing on his head to see the world. He brings that sight to every situation that he encounters and gets to see.
Mm,
And we who love him, we who love to read Chesterton, I think, don't get tired of it precisely because it doesn't quite work that way for us yet. As much as we read it, we haven't yet imbibed it. We haven't yet fully gotten our arms round the thing such that we're able to get caught in a sun shower and delight in the fact that we're getting wet in our fancy clothes. Which,
Mm.
again, you drag any kid to Easter Mass, through after rain having perhaps happened during the Triduum, and there they are in their nice, beautiful white suit trying to jump in puddles.
Hmm.
That's the right way to approach the world, I think. Um, so, um,
Hmm.
yeah, we could go so many places with this. I mean, it is, again, it's another kind of articulation of the principle that he points out in orthodoxy. He calls it, or I've called it, the Robinson Crusoe principle. The idea that you would think that it's an inconvenience to only have like one hammer or something like that, and he says that's what makes Crusoe a good book. That's what makes for the adventure. It would be if he had a whole tool shed rather than just the things that he pulled out of the wreck, it wouldn't be so great. And so to appreciate good as having been snatched from the wreck
Mm.
is the right perspective to have. I think that's the necessary corollary of this idea of an inconvenience being merely an adventure. Um,
Mm.
and that, once again, easy to say and been very, very hard to do. Very, very
Yeah.
hard to live.
Yeah, but it's good for us. I mean, going back to your idea of doing hard things, my husband just started woodworking, and he has chosen to do hand tools. So I don't know that he's got a couple power tools, like a drill, but he's doing a lot of things by hand, and it is so hard. And at this point in our development as humans, it's unnecessarily hard. But he's doing it on purpose, and part of it is like this need to do hard things and to engage with hard things. And he's very bad at it. This would go right into your quote of a thing worth doing badly, because he's not there yet. He's just started. But I don't know. There's something about doing things that are hard and doing them in spite of their hardness, because of their hardness, engaging with them as an adventure because of their hardness, because they are difficult, because they don't come naturally right away. It's all sort of a piece of like, this is part of what makes us human. This is part of what moves us along in the development of our souls. Yeah, sorry, I keep going down rabbit holes, but we can get back to the essay if you
I
like.
mean, I think the rabbit hole is well, that's the adventure. Uh,
Hmm.
just like Alice's rabbit hole, which could be
Yes.
inconvenient. No, you're right on track with this, and I think I think we're helping draw the pith out of this and showing that, like I said, it's not just a easy aphorism. It's not just a fun observation.
Mm-mm.
There is deeper meaning to it, and I think in our notes here, you pointed out one particular phrase that really gets us to some of the deeper meaning that is in this. He says, most of the inconveniences that make men swear or women cry are really sentimental or imaginative
Mm.
inconveniences, things altogether of the mind. For instance, we often hear of grown up people complaining of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train. Did you ever hear a small boy complain of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train? No. For to him, to be inside a railway station is to be inside a cavern of wonder and a palace of poetical pleasures, because to him the red light and the green light on the signal are like a new sun and a new moon. Because to him, when the wooden arm of the signal falls down suddenly, it is as if a great king had thrown down his staff as the signal and started a shrieking tournament of trains. I myself am of little boy's habit in this matter. Um, so I think that there's two important insights there. One, I mean, just stating the obvious, the scriptural insight that becoming like little children is a wisdom that we need to constantly reflect upon. But yeah, what about this phrase about the real inconveniences being matters of the mind for we grown-ups? Essentially,
Yeah.
relative inconveniences.
Yeah, so we encounter these every day, right? I think the obvious one for most people is traffic, but these things that are really up to us how we're going to see them. Right? I'm trying to find, there's a section, here we go. He's talking about the flood. I'm just going to pull a little part out here. He says, some consider such romantic views of flood or fire slightly lacking in reality, but really this romantic view of such inconveniences is quite as practical as the other. The true optimist who sees in such things an opportunity for enjoyment is quite as logical and much more sensible than the ordinary indignant ratepayer who sees in them an opportunity for grumbling. And then he goes on, but just this idea that it is what we make of it many times, not every time, right? There are some things that are truly suffering and must just be borne, right? But there's so many things that happen to us on a day-to-day basis that can be completely interpreted by how we approach them. He has a great part in this where he talks about the guy fighting with a drawer. I love that. and it's this drawer that it's hard to come out. And everybody's been there, right? He says this guy has to do this every single day. And he told him one time, if you only consider this as a great battle, it'll be great. He's like, then I knew he was going to do that every single time. Yeah. But we have this ability, we have this divine ability to transform the world around us in a way, just by how we choose to see it. Are we going to, are we going to look at, doing the dishes as a godlike practice of restoring order where there is chaos? Or are we going to just grumble about the drudgery? So these are things we can challenge ourselves, I think, to do in our own lives.
There's so much good stuff there, and I think what I would want to emphasize out of this is that, well, yes, it is how you see it, but I think Chesterton is even more radically pointing towards the fact that it actually makes a real and material difference on a spiritual level, because I think his point is that, like, this kind of thing would be impossible for the real materialist, or if the materialist were right. If there were no point to this romantic way of life, if there were nothing beyond, if all we were these sort of automata that want to go and get things done and be successful and whatnot, then indeed an inconvenience is a disaster, not an adventure. But it becomes adventurous when we realize that even the good things that we get done are themselves, in that broader scheme of things, just sort of the things we're getting through to get to where we're really going and where we're destined for. And I don't think that spiritual reading into this is a stretch. I think that this, when I read that question, that quotation about the things that really make men swear or women cry are the sentimental or imaginative inconveniences. This might seem a bit of a stretch to people, but the very first thing I thought of was Boethius. The consolations of philosophy. This is kind of the whole point. If you haven't read that masterwork of Western literature, viewers and listeners, I encourage you to do so. Get yourself a good translation and a nice pot of tea brewed, and sit down with it some evening, especially an evening when there's no dinner, when you're perhaps when you have to do it by candlelight because your power is out. Do it at a time inconvenient for you, because I think that it will reward all the more in that context, because you'll realize this was precisely Boethius's struggle as he was thrown in jail, and as he's waiting there, and Philosophia comes to him and basically chastises and chides him and says, "What have all my gifts to you been for, if you're not now consoled by them? If you're not now drawing upon them? This is what you've been trained for. This is what all of this has led up to. And now you take all of that wisdom, all of that logic, which I think is the same logic of what Chesterton is saying here, and you baptize it and
And you get St. Lawrence.
you get St. Lawrence, or you get Chesterton's version of St. Peter,
Mm.
which he puts into the mouth of Gabriel Gale in The Poet and the Lunatics, that St. Peter hanging upside down was rewarded with the vision of his boyhood, seeing, all men like, uh, seeing clouds like hills, and stars like flowers, and all men hanging on the uh, mercy of God, right?
Yeah.
Way of viewing the world in reality. It's not a stretch. It's not a stretch to say that willingly embracing the inconvenience and turning it into the adventure of your life is precisely what lets you walk boldly into the Colosseum, if
Mm.
ever that time comes.
Mm.
So, if nothing else, it's good training in the virtues of the Christian life to embrace those small inconveniences, and say, hey, this is just another cross to carry, to get in training for the big crosses.
Mm. I don't want to say anything else. I think that's a wrap, Joe.
Well, yes, indeed, and well, thank you for suggesting this topic, Gretelyn, and I think
Mm.
it just goes to show again, and we'll be doing more of this kind of thing in the future, because and maybe we'll just even call these bottle episodes pulling a thread or something like that,
Yeah.
or the Chesterton threads, because all of them trace back through that big wall of yarn that is Chesterton's wonderful brain, and then you just follow it through, and it leads you all
So,
kinds of places, but in my experience, it always leads you at least past Christ, where you can catch a
mm,
glimpse of him, because he's always there. He's at the center of that massive thought and imagination that Chesterton has. So
mm. Amen. Amen. And I would encourage, if you have any suggestions of quotes for us, leave them down in the comment box. We would love to unpack a quote that you find baffling or wonderful or confusing or whatever. We're down. We're ready.
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Gretelyn, for another wonderful suggestion and for a great conversation today.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Lots of fun.
Thank you, viewers and listeners, for all of your support and for helping us out by liking, subscribing, hitting the bell for notifications, doing all the things that tell YouTube this is exciting conversation being had here around seemingly trite little quotations that actually have a whole lot of meaning to them. I think you'd be hard pressed to find other content here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this that can get quite as much out of a single sentence. And that's not to our credit, viewers and listeners. That is really to the credit of our great friend G.K. Chesterton. So until next time, I'm Joe Grabowski for Uncommon Sense. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week. God bless you.